Linda's story time. Esther, part 2. The last time you saw me, I was heading through the throne room doors to see the king, my husband. I was beginning the plan to save my people. For if you remember, Haman, the king's most highest nobleman, had organised a day when he would have killed all the people, Jewish people, across the whole of Persia and Medes. And so I went to see the king. As I approached him, I could see the king was pleased to see me. That was a good start. And he asked me what my request was, and he said, "Anything you want, I'll give you half the kingdom," he said. I smiled. I said, "My request is much simpler. I invite you and Haman for a banquet." "Is that it?" he said. I said, "Yes, for the time being, that is it." And so on that day, Haman and the king came for a banquet. It went well. I found out that after this, between then and the next banquet, Haman had gone home that night and he'd boasted to his family. He's an arrogant man. And he'd boasted to his family and said how he was so favoured by the king and queen that he was the only one invited to this banquet. But apparently he also said he felt saddened because he couldn't enjoy it enough because of seeing Mordecai at the palace gates. Mordecai, of course, was my cousin, my guardian, the one who had refused to bow down to Haman because he is a good Jew, is Mordecai, and he only worships God and will bow down to the king. So Haman had never liked Mordecai. Apparently, Haman's family suggested that he erect a pole to impale Mordecai on, and that he go the next morning to see the king, to ask for permission to do this. Now, unbeknown to me again, the king the next morning had woken up and had decided he wanted to hear what was written in his daily record. So his royal servant had come and had started to read to him. By chance, they read to him about what Mordecai had done, which was to save the king, really. So Mordecai had heard two people plotting to assassinate the king, and he had reported it to the palace through me. He'd reported it, and his name had been put in the Book of Honour. And the king heard this being read to him, and so when Haman came in that day to ask if he could have Mordecai impaled, instead the king asked him a question. He said, "What would you do to honour someone?" Haman, being arrogant, said, and thinking it was him, said, I would give them a royal robe, one of your royal robes, and I would give them one of your horses to ride on, and I would have them led through the city streets by one of your most royal servants. He was rather shocked when the king turned round and said, "Go and find this man Mordecai, an amazing man. Go find him. Give him the royal robe, place him on the royal horse and lead him, for you are my noblest, highest nobleman. Lead him through the streets." Of course, the king did not realise how Haman felt towards Mordecai and how he felt towards the Jewish people. But Haman did it. This was an instruction by the king. If he didn't do it, he'd have been killed. So he went and he did just this. Mordecai told me all about it later. So when it came to the second banquet, I did not realise that these things had occurred that would help me with my plan. the two men came in, the king and Haman, his highest nobleman. Again, it was a feast, fit for a king. They enjoyed it. And then, as we neared the end, my husband, the king, again turned to me and said, "My queen, what is your request? Again, I will give you half the kingdom. Tell me what your request is." And I said to him, "If I have found favour with you, then I ask you to spare me and all my people, for they have been sold to be destroyed, killed, all of them. Please spare all my people and me." The king looked in horror. He had not heard about this. So he said, "Who is it that has done this to you and your people?" And I turned and I looked straight at Haman, and I said, "An arrogant and foolish man, it is Haman who has done this." The king rose in anger. He walked out of the room into the royal garden. At that point, Haman came to me, his face full of fear, and begged me to save his life. He sat on the couch beside me and started to beg and claw at me, saying, "Please, please, save me, don't do this to me." Unfortunately, the king came in as he was clawing at me, and the king thought that Haman was molesting me, so he was even more angry, and he asked that he be taken away. One of his servants came and told him about the pole erected outside Haman's house, which had been for Mordecai. The king was surprised, and he instructed them instead to impale Haman on the pole. Since then, me and my people have been honoured. I have been given Haman's estate. Mordecai has been put into the position of highest nobleman, trusted highest nobleman. And he is listened to by the king, who trusts his wise guidance. And so the king also, after we went to speak to him together, I pleaded with him that he does spare all our people, that that day is taken away, that they will not be killed. And he said it would not happen. And he asked Mordecai to write a decree on behalf of the Jewish people. And as that decree went round, signed by the king, my people celebrated. They were saved. And they created a festival called Purim. And apparently they thank me for my courage. I know it was God with me, God with us. And I will never forget Mordecai's words. Maybe you have come to your royal position for such a time as this.